the Johnson Doctrine has two sides. It means, on the one hand, that we will not permit governments to come into being overseas that we do not like, even if they are supported by a majority of the people. But the Johnson Doctrine also means that the government will not permit the majority of the people of this country to have a responsible discussion and to determine our own policy. 400,000 French troops failed to defeat this nationalist movement. How can we expect that 25,000, 40,000, 100,000 American troops will bring them to their knees in one summer? Yet we cannot wait till the next presidential election in 1968. And therefore, I think we have to vote with our feet by marching and picketing, vote with our hands by burning draft cards and refusing to pay income tax, and if necessary, vote with our backsides by sitting in jail. But finally, and most of all, I think that a strategy of nonviolent civil disobedience could be successful because I believe in the power of nonviolence.
We are at 63rd and Western, and this is the building where the draft boards, 32 draft boards covering the whole south side of Chicago, were located here. And we rented an office in the building as a bookstore, and this is where we got into the draft board offices and removed a lot of the material, mountains of files and cards, and burned them outside. We did not endanger the building, or much less endanger the life of anybody in there or anywhere around here. After being arrested, we were held in the Cook County Jail in Chicago for some days until we were released on bond. While we were in jail, many friends and supporters came and put on a vigil in front of the jail in support and solidarity with us. Jumping ahead to 1970, on February 24th of that year, Judge Edwin Robson issued a gag rule, an order against us that we could not talk about the case. These were his words, quote, "that counsel and every defendant herein make or issue no statements, written or oral, either at a public meeting or occasion, or for public reporting or dissemination in any fashion regarding the jury or jurors in this case, prospective or selected, the merits of the case, the evidence, actual or anticipated, the witnesses, or the rulings of the court," close quote. That was the judge's ruling, a gag ruling against us. That was overturned, reversed on appeal sometime later.
Well, I have I actually, my kids have a heritage because my parents were both involved with the Catholic Worker. My mother helped found the Rochester, New York Catholic Worker after having worked at Dorothy Day a little while, just like a short while. And my father was with the Milwaukee Catholic Worker, and so they, at the time they met each other, they knew people in common. And so they were involved with anti-war things and the civil rights things and so on. And as a matter of fact, one of my really good memories is a student demonstration when I was in college and against the Vietnam War. And my mother, who is exactly as tall as me, and pretty much exactly, I look a lot like my mother. But she dressed more housewifely than me, of the era. And there was some kind of a demonstration for a moratorium or something in St. Cloud, and there were 3 local colleges, St. John's, St. Ben's, and St. Cloud State College. And so there were a lot of students there, and you know, hippie-looking students with bell-bottoms and long, raggedy hair and so on. And the police were kind of itching to make some arrests. And so they kind of drew, I don't remember the specifics, but they kind of sort of drew some sort of line in the sand and said, if you don't leave by such and such a time, or if you cross this line or something like that, we're going to have to make some arrests. And so my mother got right up in front of the police and said, well, then you're going to have to start with me. And she was about the age I am now, and they just backed off.
Don't too much downplay her ties to Dorothy Day, though. I know they used to exchange sweaters, and my grandmother was interviewed in a documentary about her, where 3 different people were interviewed about their ties to Dorothy Day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they knew each other.
Yeah, they knew each other.
When she came to Minnesota, she'd stay with.
Yeah.
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 I think it's been great. And I'm very grateful to all of you for getting this together.
And one thing that I just want to say in relation to being involved, just about my interest. So it started 3 years ago, and part of it was looking at, because we have Berrigan and McAllister materials and other things, and Hit and Stay, and looking at the way that they documented so many actions across the country. And that really lit a spark in my head about the action here. And I thought, yeah, I said to Jamie, I was like, you know, I'm going to go digging around, because no one's talking about that. And we're in Chicago, you know, and that's what we're charged with is you know, making sure that local history is you know, brought to life. And so, yeah, I'm really appreciative that you're all here and so generous with your time and your thoughts and your experience, because, yeah, it's you know, the few materials that we have here and there that can help piece it together aren't the same as you being here and your experience. So.
Yeah, it's difficult to find information about it. And I was saying earlier, you know, we've been talking about some debate that we have over, or, you know, not debate, but discussion about what do we know about what happened after? What do we know about what happened to those 34 draft boards? Like, were they able to,
Yeah.
they certainly weren't able to get back to full operation because those 40,000 files couldn't be reconstructed, but.
And didn't some people come to our trial and thank us?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I thought so.
Yeah.
That said they weren't gonna be drafted now.
Yeah,
Is
because they
that-
couldn't be, they couldn't be forced to re-register, obviously. But yeah,
Because-
so I'm going to, my intention is to FOIA some records, and I'll definitely send you guys whatever I get, and, you know, share with the group all.
And I think the Selective Service at some point told, and I don't know exactly how this happened again, told people that they needed to re-register, and people researched it and found out, no, they didn't. They registered once, and if the Selective Service couldn't keep track of their records, that wasn't their fault. And so, which is kind of interesting, because that sort of also left the door open for people who hadn't registered, saying, oh, my records were destroyed, you know? So, it really put more than a symbolic crimp in the system.
And they had to move the draft board to the armory.
Well, this has been a very rich celebration for me. it kind of helps me. I now have an archive that these precious papers can come to for the Chicago Four, the Four of Us action. And to know that Tom Clark, so we represent 2 of the 4, right? And he too will funnel his here. And that serves for research, and that the communication continues with that. I feel very connected with this community. I love you, you know that, so. Okay. So this has been not only personally very rich, but it also, that knowing that this event will shine on in the work that you do.
I would echo that a little bit. I'm very impressed with the group, obviously. I married one of them, so I think the group is all right. But I really today learned that DePaul University stands for some things, and I am really impressed and hope to learn more about your great university. So thank you. Peace and justice seems to be a real thing around here, not just a word you throw around because you should say it once a year.
Is how alive, how important nonviolence has been in the world for countless amount of years, and the kinds of actions that had results. And a woman that I've just recently was able to meet, Rivera Sun, is a nonviolent scholar, and I really encourage everyone to go see her stuff online. I had a manual this thick on practicing nonviolence, and I was working with people who were dealing with homelessness, who didn't have phones, obviously didn't have a house, you know, and this woman, Rivera Sun, has put together a manual that is that thick, and it is so concise and easy to use and accessible. I think it costs $10. She does this powerful history. I took an 8-hour nonviolence training from her, and not only tells the historical stories, which is what we tend to tell, but she told a lot of the current stories. I mean, in Poland, thousands and thousands of women just recently shut down the government because they refused to go to work. Can we do that? I mean, I was really heartened by what Tom said, you know, and I think it's that kind of thinking, you know, and all of us, me as a grandma, you know, I might not be able to go to jail. Grace and I were talking about this just in terms of the women's movement. There's a network out there now. It isn't back when we had to write letters to one another. You know what I'm saying? And I've always wondered about why the progressive movement doesn't use the internet more. We have an opportunity within our own circles, like to talk to the women we know in our vicinities, and obviously the women's movement after well, the regime had, I'm glad I can't remember his name. Anyway, Donald Trump came the very next day. We were out on the streets, a whole bunch of us, you know what I'm saying? And
hundreds of thousands of people in every
city, more people, women, kids, children than I've seen in a long time in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, came out for that march. There's gotta be a way we can network those 100,000 people. They all signed some kind of list, names and sharing all of that information. And it's like, we gotta think strategically. And I think we have to think bigger. And I am so grateful for all of your stories and your courage. And it's just energized me, and I get tired all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many diseases I deal with, and I often mourn the fact that I'm not the young woman I once was, and, you know, I don't have that energy, but I certainly want to be there on the front, and I want to find a way that 67-year-olds up and down, you know, age-wise, can be involved, you know, and can share our wisdom and help move that forward.
I kind of second what you're saying in terms of using our collective experience and wisdom. I was at an event, and I can't now remember who the writer was, but a writer who had worked extensively, a white man, but who had worked extensively with the Native American community. And he said something that we don't always cherish is in community of elders among white culture is sharing the wisdom of the elders, and that we have to be sure not to feel apologetic about sharing that we have a place of experience and wisdom and advice, kind of our responsibility to share some of the lessons we've learned, and not to, you know, because in our culture, the old are throwaway, and so to not allow ourselves to be that, but to be sure to, you know, speak up, add what we can to the youth culture or the middle-aged culture or something, and really there's a lot of collective experience in this room, and so to kind of not be afraid of sharing what we know.
People in my cohort, anywhere from, you know, college, 18 or 19, all the way up to 29 or 30, we were all in this special group. Most of us were disaffected Roman Catholics, but Roman Catholics nonetheless. You can't take that out of my head. And we knew that we had this certain mission to make peace. And we also, because we were emerging from our family and learning who we were as people in the world, we came with a certain set of beliefs and thoughts about ourselves in the world. And what came from that was this belief that we had power to do some good. And I think that's carried throughout our lives, because look what's happening. You know, if we're not doing good, our kids are coming back and doing good. Or maybe letting us do good at the same time, never can tell. And so we have been changed. And you look at the kids that are coming out of families now because of the war and the evil and the lack of concern of people who are supposed to take care of the world and its peoples. They are not, kids from 18 to 30 are not getting what we got. Not that we did such a great job, but we did the best we could. And I'm wondering if anybody else has some feelings about how we were different in a way from our children or our adult children and grandchildren. I think that we were special, and it was because of those direct actions.
I understand what you're saying, but I think each generation kind of has their own prompts, or, you know, something that they can kind of coalesce around, and that, you know, whether it's climate change for some groups or women's empowerment or whatever it is, it seems to be, you know, certainly the Vietnam War was a coalescing factor for us. I know everybody's struggling with what we do now with the current climate, but, you know, it's 1984 or whatever, you know, and just when you think things can't get any worse, they do, you know, or more ridiculous or something. I mean, who could have predicted, if you wrote about this cabinet, you know, 10 years ago, people would say, well, that can't happen, you know, and it's like, you know, It's like something out of a bad novel, you know, and it has the temptation to be paralyzing. You know, it's just like nobody's got a really good, it's like, it's so huge that it's hard to deal with in a way. One of the things that I think that we have to offer is the whole idea of community and reconciliation, so that it's not us and them. I mean, it might be us and them, I'm not the cabinet, but with the supporters. It's like, how do we make the people who feel polar opposite as we do politically, how do we bring them into a community or something? How do we, even if we don't convince them, how do we approach them? You know, that's kind of a strength that we have from this movement. I mean, I'm thinking of the mysterious letter to the women of the draft board, as we are not your enemy when you stop being angry with us trying to think of what we're saying, you know, what we're saying. And I think we have that to bring to this larger conversation, because there's a lot of anger and a lot of deserved anger out there among the people who feel disaffected by the, you know, disenfranchised.
I think we love them, which is the message I think Jesus Christ brought. We love them. And we recognize that they're operating out of fear, they're operating out of a sense of no empowerment, and that we love them. And that will be the connector.
And I think that we go back to our communities and we continue our relationships with those who are in community with us. Yeah. To be able to leave here and say, hey, this is our focus, and here, that's not what this was for. And I think that there are so many ills that we go back and we respond to the ills that, like homelessness and poverty and nuclear armament and impeachment and all of the other good things that people are working toward. And we serve as a pebble in those ponds, and we have a ripple effect.
And I think we applaud ourselves for our commitments and what we're doing.
Yes, yes.
We're all dedicated.
I would like to say one more thing, and then if we can't do a song, at least we could stand up and do a group hug and at least take 3 breaths together. And this is something that was just taught to me by a young friend who studies meditation. And if we could stand up, and he said, this is a way to embrace someone, according to the Dalai Lama. So as you embrace, with the first breath, you say, I'm going to die. With the second breath, you say, you're going to die. With the third breath, you say, but we have this time together.
Okay.
Thank you. Can we do a hug here? Okay. Can we do We Shall Overcome or something? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Can we do it once more? And would you stand in the middle and sign it for us, please?
Yeah, come on.
How about I stand right here and sign it so everybody can see it?
Okay.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.